Howdy folks, it's Age with the Hunting Gear Guy. Today I wanted to talk about M-Lok and Keymod. These are two different styles of attaching a rail on a forend. And these are both really popular these days. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences between them, which one's getting more popular, and which one you should go for if you get a rail. If you want the short answer, M-Lok. If you want the long answer, stay tuned. Now, originally our forends on AR-15s kind of look like this. They're these plastic doohickeys, little metal heat shield in the middle there, and pretty big to grab onto. And one of the problems that we had with these was that they weren't free float. They would clamp onto the barrel at the front with a sight tower, and if you really pressed on it, you could potentially adjust where the barrel was hitting and change where you're hitting downrange. So that was one thing that that these plastic forends had as a disadvantage. Another thing that happened is that a lot of CNCs and aluminum machining got a lot cheaper over the years. So we were able to make these aluminum forends and make our AR-15s free float fairly inexpensively. Like, still not super inexpensive, but inexpensive enough. So that led to things like this. This is a Daniel Defense quad rail. And the advantage with something like this is that it's free float. It just grabs on over here, and the rest of this keeps the barrel free floated inside the forend. So we're not touching it, and if we press a little bit on the forend, that stress is going back here and not on the barrel where it's like a little bit wibbly wobbly, especially at the front. So that was an advantage. The other thing that happened is we're like, hey, you know what would be really cool is if these would be modular. Let's put rails on everything. Let's put a rail on the top. Let's put one on the bottom. Let's put them on the sides too, just everywhere, rails everywhere. And now we can put lights and all sorts of accessories on here, bipod, a night vision equipment, whatever we wanted to. We had the options on these things. So that was a big advantage to running these quad rails. Some of the disadvantages, the Picatinny rail is not super nice on your hands. So you can see this one has these ladder covers. They're just like little strips of rubber that you kind of put over the Picatinny rails to make them feel nicer. And they're a little bit bulky and heavy because of all the extra Picatinny rail sections on the side here. So this would end up being a heavier forend than some of the other ones we're going to take a look at. Now, the weight on the forend, I mean, yeah, you can just hump it around. It's just a rifle. It's not that bad, right? But all the weight that you take out of the forend, you could potentially go with a heavier barrel if you wanted to. So lighter forend, heavier barrel. Now, instead of running that government profile or M4 profile barrel, you could run something a little bit heavier that's going to be stiffer, that's going to be more accurate, or at least handle more heat. So that's one nice thing that we can get with a lighter forend. So what happened is we pulled the quad rails off. And instead, we went with sometimes just a rail on the top and then no other rails on it. Now we've got a nice rounded surface or a nice trim surface on there. And we've got some modularity to it as well. So these circles, this is a Troy Alpha, and those circles on there would mate up with those on a little section of Picatinny rail. This one's got a backing plate on it as well. So you take that backing plate off, these round circles would fit in here and act as lugs, and once you had that backing plate on the inside of the forend and screwed in, this would be a very strong surface, and yet you only put them where you need them. So if you don't feel like putting any Picatinny rail on there, you don't have to. If you feel like running a bipod, for example, you stick your little chunk on the bottom there, and away you go. Disadvantages of a system like this, that backing plate. The backing plate is very strong, but you need to snake it in underneath the forend. So if you have to put a section of rail at the back here, what a pain in the butt. You got to get that little plate there all the way over here, and then you got to like put it upside down and put your rail on there and then screw it in. So they're not super convenient for moving sections of rail around on a forend like this. So then some of the manufacturers came out with something called Keymod. And Keymod looks like the racking that you would see at a grocery store or something like that. And it works by you put your bolt in there or whatever, your lug or your bearing surface, and then pull it down, and that locks it in place. And for this, we've got these little sections of Picatinny rail, and they have like a little eccentric lobed kind of a surface on there. And that acts in these slots, and then you push it down, and then you tighten it from the outside. This is the big advantage here. Now we don't have to get those silly plates on the inside of these things. We can just screw it in from the outside and it locks it in place. So very nice for adding those little Magpul, or sorry, not Magpul, but Picatinny rail sections wherever we want them, and very quick and easy to move them around as well. So big advantage there in terms of the flexibility of this style of system. Now, one system that came out kind of around the similar time frame, just a little bit later, was Magpul's M-Lok. Now, instead of using that eccentric lobed key, they use a flat T-nut. So this has a kind of a wide T on it. You would turn them in to vertical, pop your section or whatever you want on there, turn them, and then they've got like a little lobe section on there, so when you turn them, they want to go flat and then lock in place on the slot. Now, the advantage of a system like this, again, you're screwing it in from the outside and not having to do anything on the inside, and we're getting a nice bearing surface on both sides, so it four contact points along the rail, and if we really whack it, it's just going to slide and deform the aluminum. These fore ends are all aluminum. Some of them are 6061, some of them are 7075, usually 6061, which is the softer aluminum. And if you beat it up, it's going to move. But at least with M-Lok, it just moves up and down on the slot, and it's not going to be that bad. And that's actually one thing that the U.S. Army found in a report that they made when because they want to do a comparison between Keymod and M-Lok. And what they found was that M-Lok would handle more abuse and more stringent abuse, I guess you could say. And usually with M-Lok, what would happen is if you put a lot of abuse on it, the accessories would slip until they hit the end, and then that's where they would stay. You couldn't move them past there. Same thing if you were to hit them back the other way. Whereas with Keymod, if you hit them up to the point where you got to the large circle there, they could potentially come out. So the U.S. Army found that M-Lok was marginally better than Keymod. Now, keep in mind, what they had to do to make both of these systems fail was pretty abusive, pretty abusive. So realistically speaking, if you've got a Keymod set up at home and you're just going to keep going with it, you're not at a real disadvantage. I mean, this is some pretty abusive stuff they are putting the rifles through to get them to fail. But suffice to say, today, if you're going to go out and get a fore end, you can still find Keymod stuff, but I'm seeing that a lot more M-Lok is being available these days. So if you wanted to get the fore end that is likely going to, like, quote unquote win or become more popular, I feel like M-Lok's got a lead right now in terms of the number that are out there, the number of accessories. I mean, having Magpul pushing M-Lok is a big win for M-Lok because Magpul makes so many different accessories. And it's at the point now where M-Lok accessories are a lot more prevalent, and you're starting to see all sorts of interesting things. Some places using it for bipods, some places using it for direct light mounts and that kind of thing. So rather than having to get your modular Picatinny rail and then put it on and then put your accessory on top of that, some places just pop right onto the rail, which is really nice. It's one less thing to do, one less thing that can fail, and it keeps it tighter to the rail if you like. So while there isn't really any difference between functional difference between Keymod and M-Lok for most of the people out there, the one that looks like it's going to become more popular in the future is going to be M-Lok. So thanks for watching.